Hello. Welcome to everyone who is joining us today for the TFM session, our earnings results for the second quarter of 2022. First of all, I'd like to introduce our executives. We have joining us Mr. Bulinsak Sorachakit, the CEO, and I am Thilapon. I'm in charge of investor relations. First of all, I'd like to ask Mr. Bulinsak to start. Hello to all of the analysts and everyone joining the meeting today. I am Bulinsak Sorachakit, and I will report the earnings results for the second quarter for 2022. Thai Union Feedmill entered the stock market last year, and we've been in this business for 22 years. We are in an industry of animal feed, and we focus on aquatic animal feed. And we have a factory in Songkhla. We have shrimp feed and fish feed. And in the last quarter, our sales, you can see, if it's quarter on quarter, we grew by 18%. And if it's in tons, we've grown to 46,000 tons. So year on year, it dropped by 10%. In terms of the sales, we have 1.2 billion Thai baht compared to the last quarter, which was 1.013 billion baht. So it dropped by 7.6% year on year. Our gross profit last quarter was 70.9 million, and it grew to 92.3 million. Year on year, it dropped 29.2%, and the net profit is the same. In the second quarter, we achieved 33.7 million Thai baht. So that's about 25% growth. 2,000 or so percent growth quarter on quarter, but a 29.9% drop year on year. So our results for the second quarter are better than the first quarter. Our costs in terms of animal feed, you've probably heard from the news. I've been in this business for 37 years, but the raw materials have never been this expensive before. And we have alternative choices, and we were looking for alternative sources. But this year, since last year up to this year, all of the ingredients have gone up significantly in terms of costs, up to 20 to 30% of our costs increasing by that amount. So it's affected all of the industry, except for the pet food business, where people are not looking at performance, they're looking at their pets and seeing whether the pets are happy and it's providing nutritional benefit for the pets. This is different from the animal feed business. In terms of our financial status, our D/E ratio is 0.12 times only. So our performance results for the second quarter are satisfactory. In terms of Thailand, it accounts for 96.5%. Indonesia accounts for 1.4%, and Pakistan accounts for 2.1%. Our revenue is mostly from domestic sources then. And the animal feed business in our market, since 2013, we've had the issue of EMS, and now the production is less than 300,000 tons because of EMS. And the Thai market is not growing significantly. Thai Union Feedmill is focusing on fish feed, especially sea bass. But because of COVID and the economic effects, this has caused a drop in the sea bass feed business for us. But we are looking at growth abroad. We started operations in Pakistan in 2021 in April, but they had the same problem as us. Their raw ingredient costs were high, and they saw a drop in demand. So we haven't seen growth there that can support our sales. Indonesia is in the same situation. We began operations in the facilities in January of 2022. So it will take time for us to filter into the market. And we also have Sri Lankan business. It's about 2%. In the past, our growth, we focused on the quality of our products so that we can be a leader in terms of quality for all of our products. But we have to do more than focus on quality. We also are providing knowledge to the community. We are providing knowledge to farmers through sessions that we organize. When we began 30 or so years ago, we started with giant tiger prawn, but this is less than 5% of the shrimp production in Thailand. Vanamai shrimp has taken over. And there's also been adjustments and improvements in the species. So we provide knowledge to farmers so that they can improve their farming. Shrimp farming is facing the challenges of EMS and other possible diseases, and the knowledge that we provide them is to help them in their shrimp farming. So they are the key feeders, and our goal is to help them through these seminars, and we will continue to have these seminars. Now let's take a look at the shrimp production. In 2009 up until now, 2022, the growth of shrimp production, especially in Asia, has improved. Shrimp is a marine animal that is better raised in tropical areas, and if it's not in tropical areas, the shrimp will be weaker. And during the winter, it's difficult to raise shrimp. So that's why most of the supply comes from Asia. There is 4.5 million tons led by Asia. And South America contributes as well. Africa contributes as well. And this year we expect to see a growth of 7.5%, and Asia will continue to lead production. And America is 1.61. That's the forecast. In Indonesia, over the past 10 years, from 2011 to 2020, the CAGR was about 10% or so. And last year, in 2020 and to 2021, it was 7%. And we predict a growth of 5.8%. In Indonesia, they had shrimp production of about 380,000 tons. They exported 270,000 tons. And this is a country that has potential, and their geographical location allows them to farm shrimp and produce shrimp all year round. If we share our knowledge in Indonesia, we believe that the farmers there will be able to produce even more, and they have the ability to produce up to 1 million tons. In Indonesia, businessmen do many things. Shrimp farming is just one of the things they do. It's not as high as Ecuador. In Ecuador, they produce more than 100,000 tons, and that is the origin of Vanamai shrimp as well. So Indonesia is a country that we believe has great potential, but it will take time to help the farmers develop and grow in their knowledge and ability. But thanks to their potential and thanks to their special privileges to export to the US or the EU, Thailand and Malaysia are different. India is also different. Vietnam is different. Indonesia is a Muslim country that the United States gives importance to. And our facilities there have begun already, and it will take time to build the sales there. But we see the second half being better than the first half. Let's take a look at production in Thailand. You'll see that the numbers from 2016 to the present time, our production is at about 200 to 3,000 tons. The first 6 months of this year, for 2022, production was 116,000 tons, which was about the same level as the 6 months for last year at 118,000 tons. So there's not much growth. So the market is basically the same. Let's look at the factors that are affecting our operations. The key factors are raw materials. We use fish meal and soybean meal and wheat flour. And the average for soybean meal at the moment for quarter on quarter has gone up by about 4%. For year on year, it's gone up about 18%. This is the average for soybean meal. There are 3 kinds we use. Full fresh soil, for instance, and that's the most expensive. And we've included that in the average pricing. And in terms of fish meal, Q on Q, it went up by about 8%, year on year 14%. And wheat flour is the same. On Q, it went up about 6%. Year on year, it went up more than 40%. And these are our key raw ingredients for our aquatic animal feed. How are we going to improve ourselves when we're facing so many negative factors, especially the raw material prices? In terms of our opportunities for growth, we're looking at organic growth in Thailand by about 5 to 7%. And in terms of our GP, in the past we were at 14 to 18%. Right now we've adjusted the numbers down a bit. We plan to maintain it from 7 to 9%. That's for this time. And this is what we have to find a way to grow in Thailand. And as for abroad, we have 2 driving engines, first in Indonesia and in Pakistan. And we expect those areas to improve. COVID has caused a delay in things, and there are regulations as well that we're facing. But we've been handling these, and we're seeing growth there as well. We have to look for new businesses, so we're considering some M&A. We're looking at opportunities there. And at the same time, we're looking at increasing products of higher profit margin. We have certain recipes for functional feed, for shrimp feed and fish feed, and we're starting to produce those. For aquatic animal or livestock raising, we need more vitamins, for instance, and products like these provide a higher margin. So we're looking at opportunities in this regard. And now it's time for some financial information, so I'd like to have Tirpon present those. Yes, I'm Tirpon. First of all, I'd like to talk about the overall picture for quarter 2 in 2022. As Kun Bonlusak told us, in terms of quarter-on-quarter or Q-on-Q, we have increasing sales thanks to the seasonal effects, and we've adjusted our portfolio from the beginning of the year. So for the second quarter, it improved compared to the first quarter, but compared to last year, it dropped due to products that we trimmed out products of lower margin. And we're still seeing pressure on our gross profit margin. At this quarter, it's at 7.2%, which has increased from the last quarter. And this is because we're seeing revenue from Pakistan, and this has improved our overall status. And we've adjusted the portfolio as well. And for SG&A, compared to the last year, it dropped 7.6% because we recognized certain items, especially the booking of the IPO, and we paid out dividends as well for the first half. And here is a look at the numbers. Our Q-on-Q numbers have improved, but our year-on-year numbers, we're still looking at effects because of the raw material effects and so forth. Let's look at sales. In the second quarter, compared to last year, for shrimp, sales went down a bit because the average price was lower because of higher competition in the market. So the average selling price dropped. But for the quarter, we're seeing higher sales on a quarterly basis. The first quarter included the end of the colder season. So we're looking at volume for fish feed, which has a low margin, and we have trimmed out products of lower margin, and this has improved our selling price. And Q-on-Q has improved because of the recovery in Pakistan in terms of farming. And we're also seeing an effect from the livestock feed sales as well. It went down 6.9% year-on-year, but improved quarter-on-quarter. And we've been able to penetrate the premium market, and that has helped. And this is a look at the 6 months situation. Year-on-year, it went down 2.1%, but we still have shrimp feed, which is a strong product for TFM, and the sales continue to grow. It grew by 7.8%, but our fish feed went down because of the volume. And what you can also see is the other sales. This is from effect from last year. We had a one-time item that caused this higher number. And because it was a one-off item, next year things will be normalized. So shrimp feed has contributed 53.8% of the revenue. And if we look at our businesses, TUKL is contributing 1.4%. AMG is still contributing 2.1%. Our gross profit margin has been under pressure from the raw material prices, but our management team have improved the efficiency in production and also efficiency in our costs. And this is to reduce the pressure. In the second quarter, we were at 92 million baht. This is better than the first quarter of 2022. From TUKL, we expect gross profit, and this will help reduce the effects that we're seeing here. And let's look at our net profit. The effects came from FX activities as well as higher raw material costs. And we're trying to control these so that we can drive net profit up again. For the second quarter, it's 33.7 million Thai baht compared to only 1.3 million Thai baht in the first quarter. We had deferred tax assets, which was a one-off item of 14.5 million Thai baht in this quarter as well, which boosted the net profit. Everyone will probably ask about TUKL, when we will be able to break even based on the predictions of the management. They talked about the second quarter for next year. And these are our ratios, our profitability ratios are all in line with our gross profit margin. Our financial position is still strong because our interest-bearing debt to equity is quite low, and we have paid out dividends in line with our policy. And here's the guidance that we are providing. We revised our guidance down, and I'd like to ask Mr. Balunsak to talk about the guidance now. As I presented earlier, our sales growth in Thailand, we will have organic growth of about 5 to 8%. But we want to do more, and we are working towards improving shrimp production. We're working with the government and with an association, the Shrimp Farmers Association and Aquatic Animal Association, to increase production in Thailand up to 400,000 tons. There are many different ways that we can increase the channels. For instance, we could look for funding for the farmers, for them to improve their farms, or funding for them to improve the species so that the Thai farmers can yield higher production for the country. So these are our efforts from the private sector with the public sector. And this will be beneficial to Thai Feedmill as well. Our gross profit margin, we have revised it to reflect the higher raw material cost. And from this point afterwards, in a while, we expect the raw material prices to start to normalize because they've been quite high for so long. Some of them have had significant increases for years now because of the situation, the pandemic. The wheat flour production, and soybean meal production in Thailand and Asia, the supply here is not enough to meet demand. Most of the supply comes from America and South America. America means the U.S., and then we have Brazil and Argentina. In Asia, there's India. But in India, their economy has grown, and their animal feed demand has grown, and so their supply is not enough. They produce about 30% of the soybean meal, and they have measures to protect their market. They are an exporter, but they had to start importing, and they have certain measures to control their costs regarding soybean meal. And in America, we expect production in America to increase as well. And we'll see effects towards the end of the year and the beginning of next year. And the depreciating Thai baht may also affect the situation too. At the same time, wheat flour, in Thailand we need to import it. We've imported wheat flour from abroad, and we've imported from Vietnam. And if we buy within the country, the prices are higher than buying from Vietnam. So we also are looking for wheat seeds from Canada and Europe, the UK. Their raw material costs are increasing as well, so that has affected us as well. Wheat flour has gone up 40% or so compared to the past. And production, because of the Russia-Ukraine war, things are, at the current moment, the prices are coming down a bit, but it's not significant enough. They are beginning to export more. If they can continue to export, then the raw material prices for wheat should lower as well, and that should help our product costs. This year, we have a monsoon and have been able. The fish capture has been lower, so that has affected the fish meal price, causing it to increase because the amount of fish that has been produced has dropped. So we're still looking at a shortage there. We have to manage our expenses. What we can control are the overhead costs, our SG&A. We have to manage it to make sure it's low. And we have to have higher yields in terms of production so that we can have lower costs. And we're working towards managing our costs. Our costs have gone up significantly. We are a controlled product, and we're looking at a higher level of competition in the market. And farmers are selling fish feed. The supply, if there's a lot of supply and lower demand, then we cannot increase the selling price because of the oversupply. And that causes the farmers to have less profit as well. So they buy less feed, and if they use less feed, that affects their shrimp and their fish, the quality of it. So we are only choosing fish where we can increase the selling price like sea bass, but it's not as in Thailand. We have tourists returning to the country, and we're looking at the high season for the tourism and end of the year, and we expect demand for sea bass to increase, and production for sea bass will increase as well, and that will help us. In terms of our investment to improve production, we've invested about 330 million baht to increase our production line in Samut Sakhon. We've also invested in an ERP system. This just happened this August, so we now have data to help us analyze and make better decisions at the management level. So our performance will improve, and this is our investment this is an example of investment that we've undertaken to improve operations. So if you have any questions, please do let us know. Does anyone have any questions? Could we have the microphone, please? Thank you. I don't have a lot of knowledge, so I'd like to ask first the recipe for the feed, the cost structure for the shrimp and the fish and the chicken and other land animals. If you break them down according to commodity, what is the weight for each ingredient? They're different. For livestock or land animals, for chicken, for instance, chicken feed, we use maize and soybean meal. If it's aquatic animals, then we use mostly soybean meal and fish feed and wheat flour. For fish, that was for shrimp. For fish, we use soybean meal and some byproducts from Europe. In Europe, they don't consume the intestines and such, so we use that in our animal feed and pet food as well. We import those from Europe. We have different grades of shrimp feed. For our giant tiger prawn, the requirements are different. So fish meal is about 20 to 30% of the recipe. Soybean meal is 15 to 20%, and wheat flour is about 20%. If it's Banamai shrimp, it depends on the grade of the product, whether it's standard or a fighting brand. The structure is different. We have a certain brand. We use fish meal mostly in, or else it's more soybean meal and wheat flour. For sea bass, we use more fish meal. For cobia or onolicious, the recipe changes as well to help with their digestion and their absorption of nutrients. So it depends on the animal. For fish feed, how much fish meal do you use? If it's for sea bass, then we use about 30%. About 30% consists of fish meal. And soybean is how many percent? Soybean is about 20%. So that means overall, if we compare this with land animals, you use soybean and maize, but if it's for aquatic feed, you use more fish meal and soybean meal. And for shrimp, we use wheat flour too because shrimp take 2 to 3 hours to eat fish meal. So the feed itself has to be able to last in water for a few hours. It has to help with nutrition. So we use wheat flour, which has gluten. It helps to gelatinize the ingredients. And the price structure, what factor is causing the price of things to go up? It's mostly from soybean meal and also because of the depreciating Thai baht. And also from wheat flour has gone up. And are we managing the stock? How are you managing stock? How much raw materials do you have as physical stock? Or hedging? Yes, we have hedged raw ingredients. We have evaluated the trends for raw material costs. The various raw materials or raw ingredients, we are receiving supply from more than 3 suppliers. That is our goal. We have at least 3 suppliers per raw material. And we have talks with them on when we will purchase their products. We have long-term contracts with them. We follow the trends, and we have been hedging and placing orders in advance for these items. We expect the trend to lower. And on the flip side, how many months worth of soybean meal do you have? We have about 1 month stock because we expect we expect things to get better. We expect a weaker trend, so we have a stock of only soybean meal for 1 month. Fish meal, the stock is difficult to manage because if we keep it for too long, the quality will drop. So we do not have long-term stocking of fish meal. We focus on quality for fish feed. So our fish meal, we are very selective with our suppliers. We audit the suppliers. We buy directly from the producers. The supply for fish meal is not enough for direct purchases, so we use brokers as well. We only use brokers that we trust, whose performance we can monitor. Fish meal in the market, there is a shortage, but we do have enough through our own efforts and working with brokers. We're able to stock enough to be able to produce the feed products that we have. There are many different grades of fish meal as well. Nutritionists are able to adjust the grade. You said fish meal, sometimes it only lasts 1 day. Yes, when there's shortage, sometimes we only have fish meal available for 1 day, but we don't face shortage because we have many suppliers. What about maize? For maize, our focus is aquatic feed, so we don't stock so much maize. But we don't face many problems with this. For wheat flour, we are buying with long-term suppliers of ours. They've supplied for over 10 years. We mostly bought domestically, but we are also sourcing from abroad. And we have long-term contracts, forward contracts of 3 months. because we don't want to keep wheat flour. If you keep it for more than 15 days, there will be issues with insects, for instance. We focus and emphasize on the freshness of our ingredients. So the raw materials seem to be very sensitive, don't they? Let's take a look at shrimp feed. When you produce it, how many ways after you production do you wait to sell it? Usually it's 3 months, but farmers want fresh and new production. So ours is 35 days. We try to unload our stock within 35 days, within 7 to 15 days. We might have stock up to 35 days or 45 days. We try not to go over that because if it's more than 35 to 45 days, then the farmers don't want it. So do you sell by cash basis? For animal feed, we have 2 channels. Our sales for shrimp, 70% is through agents or distributors, and 30% is to large farms. And then our agents have sub-agents, and for the fish feed, 100% is through our sales are through agents. And fish farming, there are mostly small farmers. There are no large producers. So again, we sell through agents and we sell to large farms. So you have to pay a commission then, right? The agents, do we sell on cash? We do, but there's a very small percentage, not up to 10% of our sales. 90% of our sales is through credit, from 7 days to 45 days credit. There are some clients that are direct farms, which may be 60 days credit. So the agents, do they have 45 days credit? Agent credit is only 30 days, no more than 30 days. But they go and add on to the price, so there's no need to deduct anything. Could I ask about the gross margin? The gross margin, I'm seeing it for the first time. It's quite low. For shrimp, fish, and livestock, the gross margin, could you tell me the range for each? We've been in this business for 22 years, and our gross profit has never been less than 10%. It's always been double digit. So it's about 14 to 18% for our gross profit margin, and our net is about 7 to 10%. But we've faced effects from higher raw material costs, every raw material, since last year. But because we expect things to go up, we're locking the prices for 3 to 6 months. It depends on our talks with our suppliers and our costs. We have been able to manage them to a certain degree. And for the second quarter this year, the raw material prices are higher than we expect. So that means it's difficult for us to lock the price, and that will cause our gross profit to drop for the second quarter. And the shrimp feed, the gross profit is 15 to 20%. Fish feed is around 8 to 15%, except for sea bass feed, which is more than 20%. But the economic situation at the moment and competition has caused farmers to choose cheaper feed. So the prices have been affected and have to be lowered, and this has affected our gross profit. So the gross margin is about how many percent? It's about 10%. 10 to 13%. And we sell under our own brands, is that right? Yes, under our own brands. We have a little bit of OEM. What about the utilization rate? of the feed factories in Thailand.
ต้นทุน utilization rate ของเรา
The
ยอมรับว่าเรา
utilization rate
ใช้
for shrimp
ถึง
feed,
คือเป็นช่วง peak กับช่วง low
we have to look at the
นะครับ
peak and the low
นั่นคือ peak
season.
ของเรามีกำลังผลิตไว้
At the peak
เต็มที่
season,
นะครับก็ตอนนี้เราใช้พื้นที่ทั้งปีเนี่ยก็อยู่ประมาณสักไม่เกิน
at peak it's
60%
about 60%.
อาหารปลานี่เราเคยใช้ร่วมร้อย
For fish feed,
แต่ตอนหลังปลา
we have produced up to 100%,
แล้วก็ประกอบกับ
but sea bass feed demand has dropped down, and we haven't been able to increase the prices for the fish feed. And it's caused an effect on our prices. We haven't been able to adjust the prices up because of the raw material prices, so our gross profit margin has dropped. So for those products where we cannot produce profit, we stop with those products. Fish feed has dropped down from 40% to 30% of our sales. So the utilization rate has dropped. Overall, it's about 60 to 70%. Your facilities, they can produce any feed, right? No, they are different. Fish feed has to be floating. Can we produce shrimp feed that sinks? Yes, but it will affect the quality. It all has to be floating. We're studying what we can do with shrimp feed pellets for them to sink. Fish feed has to float. Shrimp feed doesn't have to float. So the utilization rate for shrimp is about 65%, and for fish, the utilization rate is about 60%. And for land animals, we used to have 4 lines of production, and that was at the peak season. But the fish feed market has not grown as we forecasted, so our utilization has dropped. And the break even for utilization is at what percent? The break even over 50%. If we achieve over 50%, then we break even. Thank you very much. We have online questions as well. What are the trends for the raw material prices in the second half? The raw materials for our feed, for fish feed or aquatic feed, is soybean meal, fish meal, and wheat flour. And for the fish meal, we expect it to continue to be high until October or November, and then it will weaken because right now we're facing the monsoon season. So the farmers don't go out because of the monsoon. And that means the fish production, the fish yield is lower. So we're looking at more of a shortage of fish meal. So towards the end of the year, all 3 ingredients, soybean meal, fish meal, and wheat flour, the raw material prices in this regard should improve. And the trends for the second half, you expect them to weaken. So what about the guidance that you provided? Do you expect things to be better than your guidance then, if raw material prices drop? Yes, there is an opportunity for us to do better than the guidance if raw materials drop, because our feed prices have not changed. There isn't much adjustment in the feed prices. It's quite stable. It was just last year and this year, especially for our land animal feed, we increased it more than 20% in line with the increasing raw material prices. And this caused significant effect on our gross profit margin for shrimp and fish, because we haven't been able to push the cost of about 30% or so to the farmers.
ถ้าอุตสาหกรรมอยู่ด้วยกันได้
So
เกษตรกรอยู่ได้
the farmers
อยู่ได้นะครับถ้าเกษตรกร
we're doing this to help the farmers survive as well.
เล็กลงมากกว่านี้นะครับ
แล้วก็ในเรื่องการปรับราคาครับ
And in terms of the price adjustment for shrimp and fish,
สินค้าที่เป็นแบรนด์หลักๆของเรา
your main brands, how many percentage have you increased the prices? We have many different grades. Some grades have increased by 3 to 5%. Some grades have gone up by 2 to 3%. Wherever we can increase the price, we have.
ขออนุญาตสักสองคำ
I'd like to ask 2 questions. The first is, could you share for the outlook for the third quarter, the sales volume and the sales prices? What will they be like?
ก็ใน Q3
For the third quarter, we're going to focus
โปรดักต์
on
สินค้าอาหารกุ้งอาหารปลา
our shrimp and fish products or livestock products,
ที่มี GP สูง
on those that have a higher gross profit margin,
ได้แล้วมาดูผลประกอบการเราเนี่ยเราก็
those that
นะครับ
we cannot adjust the price of or contribute less margin, we will not focus on those, we'll stop those. We expect sea bass to improve.
คือช่วงนี้เป็นช่วงพีคของการ
This is the peak season for shrimp and fish farming. So sea bass depends on demand from the market. If restaurants open,
ความต้องการก็จะสูงขึ้น
then demand for sea bass will increase. Farmers will farm more sea bass. The past 2 years, we've faced COVID, and this has caused restaurants to close, and farmers were selling at less than their costs, and that is the reason why fish farmers did not want to increase their production. Because if COVID continues and restaurants continue to close or close again, this will affect the farmers. So farmers are hesitant when it comes to increasing production. So if things improve, we expect in quarter 3 and quarter 4 things to pick up.
ค่ะถ้าอย่างตัวโลซีซั่นของการเลี้ยง
And the low season
คือเข้าใจว่าอยู่
for farming, it's in the third and fourth quarter, right? So our business should be seasonal as well, right? Quarter 1 and quarter 2. We see low season in quarter 1 for us because shrimp farming is up to November and December.
พอจับไปปุ๊บเขาก็เป็น
And
ช่วงฤดูหนาวตอนนั้นเนี่ย
then once winter hits
ตะวันออกเนี่ยฤดูหนาวเนี่ยคน
in the east,
พอลงมากเนี่ยกุ้งก็อาจจะเกิดโรคเสียหาย
if they do too much shrimp farming, there might be possible disease or EMS, for instance.
ภาคที่มีพื้นที่ที่มีมรสุม
So wherever there's monsoons and heavy rains, they're worried about flooding, and it's also difficult to farm animals as well because of the volatile meteorological situation. So if there's a flooding situation, there will be less shrimp farming as well. But in the Andaman, from Ranong and Phanga and Krabi and Trang, Satun, Phuket, the weather and climate is better. Those are areas where there is a smaller level of shrimp farming because it's more of a tourist area. So there's not a lot of shrimp farming. So it helps, but not much. So for the entire year, for the first quarter, that's the low season for us.
ค่ะแล้วก็ขอถามตัว
And I'd like to ask about the labor cost at the moment. What is the labor cost? What is the percent? And what will be the effects of the rising labor costs? I'll answer this. The breakdown for us in terms of cost, labor cost is about 1 to 1.7% of cost of goods sold. And so the effect from the rising labor cost will not be much. Raw material costs account for 80 or so percent.
ก็ขออีกคำถาม
And I have one other question.
เห็นข่าวที่ว่า
I saw news about the fishing department allowing imports from Ecuador and India. So I'd like to ask you, how do you see this affecting the shrimp and fish farming here in the and how will it affect TFM as
ก็
well.
ตอนนี้ก็ต้องยอมรับว่าอุตสาหกรรมที่จะ
The industry that will be competitive first, or where we can compete and that will help us,
ที่เกี่ยวข้องหลายภาคส่วน
it will require cooperation from many different parties, like those who are shrimp farming,
แล้วก็โรงงานผลิตอาหาร
the farmers,
ผู้ค้าปัจจัยการ
and food production houses, and cold storage, Thai shrimps, and other Asian countries except for China. In China, they have a large population, so they also import shrimp because their domestic production is not enough. In Thailand and Malaysia and Vietnam and India and Ecuador, they have a high shrimp production, but domestic demand is only 10 to 30%. The rest is exported. And those who export, it's not the farmers who export. The shrimp has to be processed, so there's a need for cold storage. And in Thailand, we have cold storage that today the shrimp prices in Thailand are higher than in other countries, but because of the quality from the farmers and the traceability system and the cold storage systems that are standard, and we're able to provide many different product varieties and customers in Asia and America, there's demand there. There's a demand for export of shrimp products from Thailand. And cold storage, we've seen a drop in shrimp production down to 300,000 tons or so. There are 6 places that are pushing towards export of shrimp products. So we need cold storage. Cold storage is important because we need manufacturers who can come up with products that can compete with others abroad. The Fishing Department and the Ministry of Commerce have been talking with the Shrimp Association and the Cold Storage Association here in Thailand about shrimp import and trying to make sure that it does not affect the prices in Thailand. When the cold storage doesn't have demand, but they have laborers they have to pay for. Another example is Vietnam. In Vietnam, they produce shrimp. They import a lot of shrimp, and they process the shrimp for export. So for our entire industry to survive, this is one method that will help every sector. We need every player in the industry to work together. It affects the entire shrimp industry. I think time is up, so I'd like to ask our chairman, Mr. Richirong, to conclude the session. Hello everyone, I'm Richie Rong. I'd like to give you an overall conclusion. As our CEO has told you about Q2, first of all, the raw material situation for our aquatic feed has increased from last year and continued to increase up to this year. But we have studied the information, and the raw material prices now are at their peak. They have come up 30 to 40%. On average, the raw material prices, we believe, have reached their peak. Every commodity, when they reach their peak, they go up very quickly and strong. and that means that they will come down. The drop will be drastic as well. That is why our CEO has said that we are stocking as little as possible. And for the expensive items, it doesn't make sense for us to stock them for 6 months, for instance. We only stock what we need. And from this point on, because the raw material prices have peaked and they will come down dramatically, there's a recession as well. We expect things to drop. The lower the raw material prices drop, the better for us. And in this industry, for over 20 years, this is an industry that has had high margin. Even though this year we have faced effects from raw material prices, some going up 20 or 30%, but we've only been able to increase our selling prices by 5%. So why have we only been able to increase the prices so little, but we still have profit? Even though we have 20 or 30% increase in raw material prices, this is a good thing for TFM. We have adjusted our portfolio, our product portfolio. We have been expanding all our products that we can. For instance, our fish feed. We have our catfish. We have cobia, tilapia, and also sea bass, which is a high-priced fish, and the margin is good. It's from 14 to 18%. We have a net profit of double digits, which is very good. And whenever we have problems like COVID and inflation and the war between Russia and Ukraine, for instance, affecting the raw material prices, we've taken this opportunity to adjust our portfolio. Our sales have not grown, you'll see, but it's not that we've lost customers. It has been our intention to lower or reduce those products that have profit margin of less than 5% or negative gross profit. So if we cannot adjust prices up, then we will not sell those products. That is our policy. So I don't think we should be producing a lot and gaining loss or having loss. It's better for us to cut those products that are generating loss out of our product portfolio and taking a step back and managing our portfolio better. In the first quarter, we had about 1 million baht of revenue. In the first quarter, it was the lowest ever. But if you take a look at in quarter two, we came up to 30 or so million. So we think that quarter three and quarter four, this trend will continue. We're looking at continuous profit, but whether it's going to be a higher profit or lower profit, we will update you on this. And the second thing is that we have entered the land animal feed market, and the margin is not that high, but our factory in Songkhla has production capacity left over. So we thought it would be better to use that remaining product capacity so that we can have economy of scales. And the margin for this feed is about 10%. It's usually 15 to 16% in the year. So if we can achieve 8 to 10%, that will help with the overall cost for TFM. But then we're facing the raw materials issue. The livestock feed, we choose to focus on pig feed. That yields the highest profit. And chicken feed, that is the product that yields the lowest margin. So, of course, we're going to choose the feed that provides the higher margin. We also have duck feed, which offers a good margin. So our product portfolio, even though the margin is not that significant, but it's still a portfolio that is providing us with profit. So overall, I think we have already passed the lowest point for us. If raw material prices are adjusted downwards, then the situation will improve for us. The next thing I'd like to share with you is that if you can remember, apart from the engine here in Thailand, we have our investments in Indonesia. I traveled there last month. In the last 2 months, I went there 2 times. I went with our CEO. I went with Mr. Banlusak, our CEO. We had meetings there, and we also went to observe the situation. Our plan in Indonesia was going to be one engine to drive our growth this year. And we're not seeing that growth yet because of the license issue and contacting the relevant government units, and because of COVID. In Indonesia, they're very, very strict, so it's affected the entire process. And we have gone to adjust many different items, and we now have a license. We have received the license already, but we did have to spend about 4 to 5 months dealing with that. So now that we have the license, we will be able to start commercial production. And in Pakistan, it was a seasonal issue. In the winter, they don't raise fish, and it gets very cold there in the winter. Right now is the summer, and they will start farming again. So every company has challenges when it comes to raw materials. And raw materials for animal feed is very expensive, and we're trying to shield our partners and customers from the effects as much as possible. This year, our overall profit, we will have profit. We will achieve our target, I believe. I think it's going to be a good year for us, and we'll be adjusting our portfolio so that once things start to normalize, our performance will be very strong. It's like dealing with an obstacle. It's a monsoon for us, and we're lucky that we have not had to report any losses in terms of business. Lastly, this year, I think we will see clear recovery in quarter 4. And next year will be better than this year, much better than this year. This year is probably the lowest point. If you have any other questions, please, we welcome any other questions you might have. I think our engine next year, everything will be complete. I just got back from America. Mr. Tirapung and Mr. Ludovic told you, right? They went to a board meeting. We went to a board meeting in America. We went to see Red Lobster. Over there, no one is wearing masks. We had a GM conference all the way to senior vice presidents and CEO. There were 1,000 people all in the same room. No one wore a mask. We Thais, Tirapong and I, in Thailand, we wear masks. We go over there. We couldn't wear masks because they looked at us as if we were sick. Over there, if you're not sick, you don't wear a mask. On the airplane, you don't wear a mask. So coming here back to Thailand, we had to be tested for COVID. They're worried we're going to be spreaders of COVID. I think traveling, I was in Japan. When I got on a Japanese airplane, I was on All Nippon Airways. As soon as I got onto the airplane, they had us wear masks. But in America, United Airlines, American Airlines, no one was wearing a mask. But on the Japanese airlines, everyone has to wear a mask. I got on an airplane at Narita, everyone was wearing a mask. No matter where you were in Japan, if you don't have a mask on, they will give you a mask. If you go into the lounge, for instance, they'll hand you a mask if you don't have one on. And if this is the situation, the world has to reopen. So coming back to the question, next year, what do I expect? I think we have to live with COVID. And if this is how we can continue on, if we can accept that we have to live with COVID and consumption resumes, I personally believe that we will see recovery for TFM, and it will be a strong recovery. And also with the dropping of raw material prices. With the 5 to 10% increase labor costs that you were talking about, we are not labor intensive. We have 300 to 400 people only compared to the entire group, which is about 30,000 people. So the cost of labor is only 1% or so. So if the labor costs increase, it's not going to affect us much. It's the raw material costs because they contribute about 30% of the costs. So this year, TFM is working internally to adjust and improve and be ready for the future. So I'd like to ask another question. On the sales guidance page, before revising it, can we use these numbers for 2023, 15% for next year? Sales growth, gross margin 10 to 14% for next year. Can those be the guidance numbers for next year? Well, this year, 2022, is a year of adjustment for us. So next year, 15 to 70% should not be difficult, unless there's a new strain of COVID or some factor that every business is unable to handle. But I believe if things start to normalize, which they should, then we can have those numbers. Yes, the numbers that you see that we revised down from, those are regular numbers for us. 10 to 14% is a bit on the conservative side. I think ours should actually be 14 to 18% gross profit margin. So can you expect these good numbers in the first quarter? I think it will be a gradual thing. It's not going to be a significant jump, an immediate jump. We can achieve double-digit numbers in quarter 4 because right now it's at 7%. The 7%, we have to compliment the management because they've been able to make sure that we do not run at a loss. Quarter 1, it is possible for us to achieve 10 to 14%. And will we see sales growth from quarter 4 of 15% in quarter 4 this year? Our business, the high season is quarter 1, and quarter 2 and quarter 3 is the growth period. And quarter 4, let's wait for those numbers. But I believe that the numbers for next year, in terms of both sales and revenue and gross profit, 10 to 40%, we're confident that we can achieve those numbers. I think we're running over time, and we have a lunch meeting on the 24th floor. So we'd like to end the TFM session for now. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you.